he was, I think, a pretty inspirational guy in his own right, but just shared with us some of the folks that he found inspirational, and who sort of inspired him to push on and push through adversity. And Chris, you came up.
It's amazing.
You came up. He, Tyler, as you know, doesn't have was born with spina bifida and does not have full control of his legs. Right. Nonetheless, wrestled in high school, became an amateur bodybuilder, powerlifter. He just posted a clip on Facebook today. He's benching 395 pounds. He weighs 150.
It's more than I could.
Yeah, yeah, and has not really let anything kind of hold him back. And as he was sort of talking about this sort of culture of perseverance in grappling and jiu-jitsu and in wrestling, your name came up. And I'm going to be honest, I'm kind of embarrassed to say that I didn't know your story. And but he told it on the last podcast, and he's like, and here's the thing, he's just a few hours away. So these are strange times that we live in, but one of the benefits is that people, we can just reach out and connect with people quicker than you otherwise might be able to in the past. Yeah. So here we are. So I understand that you're the oldest American to ever medal in wrestling at the ripe old age of 37 years old.
Yeah, I was 37. I think it was. So the Olympics were in August, and so I was about a month away from my 30th birthday.
Wow.
In Barcelona.
In Barcelona. Right. And you, that was the 88,
the 1992 team.
The 92. Yeah, that was the 92 Olympics.
Yeah, I was on the 1980 Olympic team.
Right.
Where there was a President Carter boycotted those Olympic Games.
Right.
And I didn't get to go. That was when I was in my prime. I was 26, and so I was at the top of my game then.
So you, it's quite a long layoff.
Yeah. What I did was I've been a vegetarian since '79, so I had always sort of watched what I ate. I was really into yoga, and I liked running and weightlifting. So between because then I also tried to make the Olympic team in 1984. And so I was training up through 84, and in 84, the week before the Olympic trials, I tore my ligament in my knee.
Oh, goodness.
So I didn't make the 84 team. And then I went to law school, and I figured I was done through 84 to 87. And then I got a job with United Technologies Carrier Corporation, worked there for about in Connecticut for about 7 months, and then they moved me to Syracuse, New York, where Carrier is located. And Syracuse, New York had a wrestling team.
And they got a wrestling team there.
That's right. And I had a kid named Mark Kerr, who you might know from some mixed martial arts.
Oh, yeah.
And and Mark Kerr was, just needed some direction. And so I started to go to wrestling practice at least 3 days a week.
Yeah.
And then I was noticing, okay, wait a minute, I'm running every morning. At lunchtime, I go out and I weight lift. And then on the evenings, that I'm wrestling 3 days a week. This is
you were living like a competitor.
Yeah, that's my training schedule. I said maybe I could try to compete. So I think it was 90. I came back out. I think it was in 1990. So from 84, I was done until 90. Came back out, and I was second in the nation.
Wow.
Was I second? No, actually, I think 80, maybe 89. I tried. And I didn't make the team. I did pretty well. I think I was second in nationals, but then they had the world team trials, and I got blown out in the world team trials by a guy who, like a month before, was so weak that I could easily beat him by about 12 points. And then all of a sudden, it was like this guy was a rock when I was wrestling, and it just crushed me.
Really?
It was quite a startling change.
Well, you won't say it, but maybe I will.
Who knows? He was committed, right?
Yeah.
So then in 1990, I trained again, and this was, I think, all under the rug is what I would call it, because my company didn't know about it. And I won the nationals, and then I was second in the world. And when I got back in town, my boss said, "You know what? You were second in the world." And we as a corporation think that maybe you should focus on that, because if that's a gift you have, we don't want you to waste it. So Carrier Corporation started to sponsor me, and
what a tremendous opportunity!
Yeah, it was really neat. I worked with some really nice people there, and that was completely different. Because let me give you an example. As a wrestler, when we went to the World Championships in 77, went to the World Championships. We slept in a barn on hay because we couldn't afford, hotels and all that stuff. This is with the older AU. It was terrible. It was horrible.
Oh my goodness.
And now in 1990, I'm staying at 5-star hotels wherever I'm training, and I have a total rental cars. And if I want to bring in 10 guys to train with me, I bring them in to train. And so it was really different. A lot of fun, but really different.
Do you actually? I'd like to just maybe talk about that contrast a little bit. I think it was maybe Sugar Ray Leonard. One of these famous boxers had lived like a really austere lifestyle, even though he had amassed quite a bit of money in prize fighting. And a reporter asked him, hey, you're still driving the same car, you're still living in a studio apartment. He says, well, hard to get up and jog at 5 a.m. If you're in silk pajamas.
Yeah.
Having seen having slept in the barns, and then also being sponsored by a large corporation like Carrier, and the different treatments, do you feel like you lost anything in the austerity, or maybe it facilitated you training in ways that the previous lifestyle could not have?
It was just the opposite.
Yeah.
When I was training in 1980s, sort of when I was in my prime, nobody was paying us any money. I can remember at one point being on food stamps. It was very, very stressful. And
as one of the top wrestlers in the world on food stamps.
Yeah, and I was getting hurt all the time. And so that's at like 23, 24, 25, 26. I'm getting injured all the time, and I'm so stressed out. And then when I'm 35, right? So we're talking about 10 years later, and I got this company paying everything for me. And for me, it was love to go. So going running, I would hate to miss running. So that I don't care if I was in the Taj Mahal, I would go out running in the morning, or weightlifting. That was like the best parts of my days. So I could just train as hard as I wanted to. I never got hurt. And that's the one thing I noticed.
Yeah.
So it was really pretty interesting.
You had the right food in your body. You were able to take care of yourself. You were probably a little bit less stressed.
I think it was the stress.
Yeah.
And I could totally focus on training.
Yeah. When you
so maybe there's a certain level,
like a curve.
Yeah. If it got too rich, then it would ruin me. But money definitely helped.
But that's interesting. That's a valuable perspective. I think, and I see a lot of that with like up and coming MMA fighters. Mm-hmm. A lot of the process of getting ready for an MMA fight is kind of like a resources game. Mm-hmm. If you're running away from the dogs of poverty, very difficult to put together the right type of nutrition, and then to travel to the places that you need to travel to get the different the looks at the different techniques and the different instruction, right? And however difficult that is in just in one sport, in a multifaceted sport like MMA, I think oftentimes you do see the folks with the access to the better resources wind up winning, right? Because that's ultimately access to better instruction. There's so much to cover here. I'm sort of struggling, but can you talk to us a little bit about your sort of how you got introduced to wrestling and sort of what made you want to wrestle? We were talking earlier about you did some football, wasn't for you, and you started wrestling about 9th grade, is my understanding.
Well, actually, the first year I ever wrestled was in 4th grade. So my town, Westfield High School in Westfield, New Jersey, was a really big time sports town.
Okay.
And so they had this Pee Wee wrestling program.
Okay.
Really, really nice program. And so we started producing a lot of wrestlers. I wrestled one year in 4th grade. Didn't wrestle again until 9th grade. And I can remember, I think it was when I was in 9th grade and I had wrestled a little bit, I was sitting in the bleachers watching a wrestling match, a high school wrestling match. And I saw this guy do a switch, which is really a simple wrestling move. But it just looked like magic to me. It looked so beautiful. It was like art. I was like, I got to do this, And so that was when I fell in love with wrestling. And from that moment on, that's all I wanted to do. And so, I was a Jehovah's Witness, so my mother wouldn't let me wrestle because she wouldn't sign the permissions to wrestle my junior year in high school. So I went to junior college and every day worked out with the junior college team.
It was actually maybe an advantage.
Maybe. So come my senior year, for whatever reason, and to this day, I don't know why, she decided to sign it. And so she signed it, and so I went on and I won the states, and then went on and I actually I was second to nationals for freestyle nationals as a high schooler, and I lost a guy named Mark Johnson who I would eventually beat in the nationals in college a couple of years.
Got it.
He was a great guy. He was a Greco guy too, really strong in that art.
Right.
And I was a freestyler.
So I listened to a couple of interviews with you in preparation, and it sounded like you didn't actually get to compete until your senior year, but you'd been just training for several years up until that point. What was that like training with no hope of competition for several years?
Again, it was an opportunity I loved wrestling, and I would wrestle. It's like one of the neat things about being on the 1992 Olympic team was me, Kenny Mundy, Kevin Jackson, got John Smith, got Bruce Gumgarner. We would wrestle anywhere, anytime, any place. And we didn't care if it was practice. We didn't care if it was anything. We just wanted to butt heads. You know what I mean? It didn't matter. So that was that was the way I was. It was. I don't care. I'm wrestling.
Yeah.
But when I go into competition, I had a definitely different sort of frame of mind.
Yeah. Yeah. So where'd you wrestle in college?
Wrestled University of Iowa.
Iowa, right? Yeah. You were not originally recruited by Iowa, though.
Right.
Is that correct?
That's right. I wasn't recruited by anybody.
Yeah. Why do you think that was?
Well, it was because I didn't wrestle until I was a senior. I don't think anybody knew about me. And then then the word got around that my mother was a Jehovah's Witness, and she might not sign a letter of intent. So I don't think I really got any good looks. I think I was recruited by some regional wrestling semi-powers. I think Wilkes-Barre, they had a fairly good wrestling program for a small college.
Okay.
And Maryland was another one, University of Maryland, which is a Division I, big time college program, but they weren't good.
Yeah.
So, but what happened was I was recruited by Montclair State, and there was, I forget the coach's name is Rich. I forget his last name. Softman, I think it was.
Okay.
They were recruiting me, and so when I told him that I wasn't going to Montclair, I told him I was going to go to Maryland. He said, "Chris, I can't let you do this. I'm going to go talk to this guy named Gable, and we got to get you in the program because you just got way too much talent to waste doing that. And so you need to go out there." So when Richie said that, for whatever reason, I was like, okay, I need to go to the best place. I had a car that I had bought working in gas stations. I sold my car, got a plane ticket out to Iowa, got a factory job working on the Iowa floor during the summer. Okay. And I went to their practices, and then I walked on my freshman year at the University of Iowa.
Is this summer of like 75, 76?
73.
73.
Yeah.
Okay. So you... 73 now, I think the civil rights era was only 10 years. 64 was the 60. Right, it was the big year, and it was only 10 to 13 years past much of what had happened in the American civil rights era, right? But we're still struggling.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
What was that growing up like? I mean, wrestling is oftentimes very dominant in rural communities. Yeah. It's associated with a very conservative sort of ethos in American culture. Yeah. Did you face any discrimination, or do you think you got treated any differently, or was that something you had to battle?
My hometown, Westfield, was sort of, you had people who lived on two different sides of the track. So on one side of the train tracks, you had all the rich guys who went to Wall Street for banking. On the other side of the track, you had all the people who cleaned their houses. And so my mother cleaned houses. But they had a high school, Westfield High School. It was a neat high school with a bunch of neat people. I don't think I ever felt really discriminated against in high school or in the town of Westfield. in that perspective, it was like the whole town, the whole culture was, we want all of our children, black, white, yellow, green, to achieve as much as they can, and we're here as a group of people to make sure that happens. That's the way I felt in Westfield. I don't think we live in that environment anymore. I think it has gotten a lot more toxic, and I don't think people are willing to help. So in that respect, there has been a change. Now, with respect to the civil rights movement, it was some very interesting times for us because, as you can imagine, when children are having dogs sicked on them by police for marching, that can create a great deal of anxiety, and in both ways. So, like, a lot of the people in our town, or black people in our town, was like, "Well, hey, don't be causing trouble, right? Because you're going to get
why are you stirring the pot?
Yeah, you're going to get stuff on us." And then other people say, "Well, we got to make progress." So, so I was aware of that going on, but I was in a culture, in a society where they wanted everybody to do well, and that was, I see now, remarkable times that I lived in.
Yeah, that is remarkable. That's like a little island in time and space, right? Yeah. And was it the same over at Iowa? No, that's what I had heard. What was that like?
Well, as a New Jersey kid, going to Iowa was just total culture shock. Yeah,
on a number of different levels, right? Urban, rural.
Yeah, exactly. And cultural, I don't know. Everybody goes to the bar and drink a bunch of beer. I mean, that was the thing to do in Iowa. That's not what we were doing in Westfield. Not to say that wasn't fun.
Sure.
So it had its challenges for me. It was very tough. But as I look back on it, I would have walked through fires to be able to be coached by Dan Gable and the assistant coach Jay Robinson, and in that program I was in. So it was certainly worth any of the negative that went with it.
Well, from what I understand, you and you were Gable's first NCAA title winner, as he was
his first national champ and his first world champ.
Yeah. And so I'd heard a funny story that you kind of antagonized him a little bit. You kind of had to make yourself know. You told him, "Hey, I'm going to kick your butt."
Oh yeah, I can be really stupid that way if you want to hear the story. He came and spoke actually right after the Olympics. He came and spoke at a high school, and so I'm this brash, 12th grader walking up to him saying, "You're not tough," saying, "I'll kick your butt."
Could I say you were aware of your own talent?
I wasn't aware of my limits, And so then when I go out, I get my plane ticket, go out to Iowa. We go to the gym. The very first time we practice, and I'm like, "Come on, I want you." And those are really the last things you want to do to somebody like that, right? So I said, "Okay, let's go," and I took him down right away, within maybe 5 seconds.
Just right off the whistle.
Right off. Took him down. That was quick. And then for the next hour, he beat me to death. I mean, we'd have things like arm bars and so forth, so that I had, if you know Matt Burns, I had all the skin off the left side of my face was gone, all the skin off the right side of my face was gone. I felt like both my shoulders were dislocated. He pretty beat me up. So that was an interesting lesson.
Man, he was that good as a coach.
He was incredible.
Yeah. I mean, I know Dan.
You can't even say it. You can't. I can't tell you how great he was as a coach. It's not describable.
Not even just good as a coach, but he was also, dare I say, the best wrestler in the room at that time.
The best and the meanest.
Yeah, man,
but I mean, he never came out. He never came out as mean. You just knew. For example, if you took it easier practice, and he said, "Okay, let's go," I mean, you knew you were in trouble. And you could see guys who go with him because he wouldn't let you rest. They'd be trying to crawl off the mat. He'd pull it out the ankle, pull it back on, and start beating them up. And so, I mean, he would never yell at you, but if you did something wrong, you may have to practice with him.
Yeah. Do you and Dan have like a little bit of a special relationship since you're his first major big tournament winner like that, or?
I felt we did. I mean, me and Dan didn't always get along.
Yeah.
But I think we always had that competitive drive kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of what he had wore off of me. So I mean, I think he recognized that in me, and on that level, we got along really great.
What levels didn't you get along on?
Well, I do think I am. How would I say it? I'm like a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in a certain way when it comes to the rights of minorities and so forth. I'm not the type of person who will say, oh, let's go along, get along. I'm the type of person who will say, you know what, this is wrong and we need to have this changed.
It's time for change.
Yeah, so, and Dan is not that way at all.
Well, you're also perhaps living a different experience than Dan was, since you're black and he's white, right?
Yeah.
So he might not understand the fierce urgency of now,
yeah,
in the way that you do,
yeah,
because he's not black, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you can say that about a lot of people.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think therein was a little bit of our friction, and then I would get lazy a little bit from time to time, and of course that's not acceptable to Dan, which is perfectly reasonable.
Okay.
I was really focused, and then I got a little unfocused, and then I got back focused again when I started my international stuff. But so we had a little disconnect on those levels. But
yeah, he yeah, I get that. I could see that being very frustrating. What was your treatment like by the fans and the rest of the team? Were you the only black guy on the team?
I don't know if I was the only black guy. There was one or two. Iowa fans, for the most part, were pretty good. I mean, I got called niggers once or twice, but
Did that stir anything up in you?
I mean, anger. I'll tell you a story about Iowa. So here's my anger thing, and this is what sort of gets me when people talk about, well, everything is fair and everybody has an opportunity in this country. I decided I wanted to go to law school, so let's go back. So I was trying to figure out how to train because I just graduated from Iowa and I needed to make some money. So I was a bouncer at a bar, and so we had a downstairs bar and an upstairs bar. And so this upstairs bar had like a disco setting, and I realized, it was really neat, but nobody went there because, the culture of Iowa is you go to the bars and you drink beer. And so the downstairs bar, they were two separate bars, was really, had a lot of customers going in. Upstairs bar, nobody. So, and I was the bouncer. So I said to the manager, wasn't even known, I said to the manager, look, you give me the worst night that you do business, and I'll show you that I'm going to make a profit for you upstairs. He said, okay. And so, I went out and I knew that nobody was catering to the black tastes in that area and culture. So we bought a bunch of albums, I got flyers out and so forth to get people to come to this event. And so the Tuesday night got a DJ. The Tuesday night came and the place was packed. And it was so busy that I had to jump behind the bar and help people sell alcohol to make money. And it was standing room only. This is a Tuesday night. And so at the end of the night, the manager came up to me and says, well, we can't do this anymore. I said, why not? And he said, well, we didn't make any money. I said, there's no way we didn't make any money. I had to get behind the bar to sell extra drinks. We made money. He goes, well, I'll tell you. I saw a white guy come up. He took one look and then turned and went back the other way. So I can't have it because he's scaring away our white business. And so for me, that was very angry because that was the point when I said I had to go on food stamps. That was the point when I had to go on food stamps because I had gone broke, and that was sort of what was going to make it for me. So then I said, okay, well, I'll keep going. And I was studying for the SATs or LSATs for the law school exam.
Right.
At the time, so there was a police job came open. So I applied for the police job. And so you had to take a physical test, you had to take a psychological test, you had to take a written test. All right. So we did the physical test, and I was so far above everybody else there. It was really obvious.
I'll bet,
right?
yeah.
So I was like at world-class training level. We took the psychological test and then took the written test. And so I didn't get the job, and I came back and I said, well, why didn't I get the job? And they said, oh, you flunked the written test. And I said, I flunked the written test. That's really interesting. And so then I called up the employment department or whatever for the state. And then they came back to me and well, first I got this offer to be a police by the offer of the job by the police, but by that point I was afraid, and I didn't want to be around people with guns who didn't really want me around.
Yeah, that's
so
fair.
I got afraid.
And maybe not respond to your call to help if you're out there on your own.
Or shoot me.
Or shoot you, yeah.
So I didn't accept the job. I mean, then they came around. They came to me and says, "Well, Chris, what did they tell you?" I said, "They told me that I flunked the test." And they said, "Well, you know what? You got the highest score of the test of anybody." And then I laughed about it a little bit because I said, if they would have told me I'm a wrestler, if they had told me I flunked the psychological test, I would have never questioned it, right? I mean, I said, okay, fair enough. But it was the wrong test. So
you flunked me on the wrong test.
Yeah, those two things happened to me back to back, and then I got angry. And I think I was angry for about a month. And then I realized, you know what? I'm angry. But all these people who've denied me these opportunities, they're not losing a lick
bit
of
sleep. Yeah.
They're not sort of being angry with their wife, and then a wife, and she had a child at the time, sort of like you. No. And so I said, well, you know what? I just got to let this go. And so that was sort of my experience in Iowa with respect to those issues.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, anger not a useful emotion in the hearts of young men.
Yeah, well,
it can consume you.
Yeah,
right?
Well, anger is very dangerous.
Yeah,
but and you can see it, but in everything in the world. But yeah,
and so while that was all going on, you were wrestling the whole time.
Trying to make so that would be probably trying to make the 77
Olympic. Okay, so this is after you had graduated college.
Yeah, it was like months. Well, yeah.
And so after you graduate college, you're hanging around Iowa trying to figure out what your next step is, and also still trying to make the Olympic team.
Yes. And so what happened, right after that happened, a guy named Willie Gatson, who was a wrestler at Iowa State, heard that I was struggling. And me and Willie were competitors. We wrestled in the same weight class. And so he talked to Harold Nichols, who was a coach at Iowa State. And then they offered to pay me $400 a month to come up there and coach.
Hey, that's something.
That was great at the time, So I went up there and went to Iowa State and took some courses because Harold Nichols was always really demanding that if you're here, you're going to continue to educate yourself. He was a great man that way for all of his wrestlers and his coaches. And so that gave me the opportunity. So when I was there at Iowa State, I won the World Championships. That was in 1980 when I made the Olympic team, beating out the defending Olympic gold medalists and through that period.
So you were, you'd held a win over the defending gold medalist. You're fairly certain you're going to win the gold if you have the opportunity to compete. I mean, nothing's ever certain, right? But
exactly. There was nobody who could have. Well, I won the World Championships the next year, but there was nobody who could do what I could do at the 1980. I could have gotten caught, but absent getting caught by a move, nobody was going to beat me.
Right. I'd heard that there was previously not a tech fall rule.
Right.
And they sort of implemented one out of mercy because you were just tearing through the competition. Is that right?
Well, that's another funny story. So through the 77 to 1980, they had what they call a stalling call. And so you get called for stalling, warn, and then you get for another stalling, it's another point, another stalling, another point, another stalling, 2 points they'd give the guy, and then they'd kick you out. And so what I found was, in every close match I got, and I was being called for stalling all the time. And I was losing matches not because the guy could take me down or beat me. I was losing matches because the refs were stalling, calling me for stalling. And so at that point I had to face a decision. Huh?
Because they could. Because it was in their power to do so. And you probably were not actually stalling.
Oh, I don't know if I wasn't actually stalling. I mean, I'm sure I was stalling it sometimes. But, I mean, when you're beating a guy up, it just seemed to be fundamentally unfair for me to be penalized because I'm beating him up. So what I decided to do, I said, okay, I can either quit or I can just start beating guys by 10 points. And then it won't be any issue. I decided to start beating guys by 10 points. And then I started training a lot harder and got my technique. And so, one of my first matches against one of my nemesis was a guy who was always beating me on these stalling calls. And I beat him 23 to 6, I think it was, in the Olympic trials. And it was all because, and it was kind of funny. So they had three 3-minute periods. So after the first 3 minutes, I was beating them like 11-2, and the refs had called me for the 2 warnings and the 2 points. So
the next one you get kicked out.
And they were clapping actually, and they came over to me and they go, "Hey, the next stalling call and you're out." Now I had taken the guy down, I had thrown him, I had arm thrown him, I had tripped him, I had done everything but kill the man in the first period, and they were going to caution me out, which was unreasonable. And then people started to boo, and that was the first time they got that reaction. And then I continued to beat him, like I say, 23-6, and he didn't wrestle anymore after that. It so destroyed him because I think he realized it just wasn't close. And then I beat John Peterson was the defending Olympic gold medalist. I beat him like 10-2. His 2 points were the stalling. Eddie Bannock, who was a 3-time national champion, Olympic gold medalist, I beat him. He was my closest. I maybe beat him like 11-5 or 6 or something like that. But everybody I beat, I got at least 10 points over. After that tournament, then they sort of laid off me. I got a feeling that the national coach came up to him and said, "Listen, this guy's wrestling at such a level, he's going to be, really produce for us in the world. So, lay off a little bit." So that was sort of my stalling story, and getting into really what I would say top shape, fierce fighting shape in the '81 to win the world championships.
Yeah, there's a
make the Olympic team actually in '80.
Yeah, you're an Olympian.
Yeah.
There's a sort of like a social and political overlay over the '80 Olympics because we did not participate. And you didn't have the opportunity to compete. Can you explain that for folks? I mean, that was a little bit before my time. I understand Jimmy Carter pulled this out, but I feel like you probably have a better perspective on that.
So, if you can imagine this, the Russians were invading Afghanistan, and because for whatever reason, I don't know whether it was for the oil money, if they were trying to get some oil routes or whatever, the United States decided that was a problem. So Jimmy Carter asked the United States Olympic Committee to boycott the Olympic Games, and they refused, which they should have done. They should have refused. And then what he did was he said, "Well, if you go to the Olympics, we are going to take away your tax protection status."
Oh, wow.
And basically destroy you as an Olympic organization. And after Carter made that threat, then the Olympic Committee decided to go along and boycott the Olympic Games. So whenever I see a picture of Jimmy Carter, I make sure I give him the finger salute. That's what happened with the Olympic Games. And it was crushing for me because I had trained really hard, and that was everything to me, everything. And I think some of your fighters may know what I say when I say it was everything to me.
Yeah.
I'd be willing to die for it. And this guy took it away with no second thought. And it's really such a tragedy that we're in that.
It was really a political move, right?
It's all politics, right?
Yeah.
And here's what really bugged me. They put the Olympics on TV, so it wasn't like he was barring CBS or NBC, whoever had it, from showing it.
Were you sitting at home watching it?
Oh, hell no, I wouldn't watch it.
You couldn't watch it?
No. So, basically he picked on the people that were vulnerable who couldn't fight back. He was a bully.
Well, was the Russian invasion of Afghanistan at that time period really such a big deal? We went back and we invaded Afghanistan ourselves just 20 years later.
That's what I'm saying. It's so ironic, right? Yeah.
Have you looked back on it? Have you looked back on those matches now?
My matches in the 1980.
The matches in your weight class.
No.
You haven't looked at them now?
No, I don't know who won in '80. Who won in '80? Somebody I beat in '81.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you couldn't bring yourself to watch that bracket unfold.
No.
Yeah.
No.
That's tough. That's really tough. Yeah. When you had left Iowa, University of Iowa.
Yeah.
And you were getting ready to compete for the Olympics. How did your training change? So you were doing folk style wrestling, right?
Yeah.
This is folk style to freestyle. And so, actually, if I could just kind of maybe put this in context for, I suspect the majority. I'm actually not sure who's listening aside from my own mother. But just to sort of maybe put this in context for folks who are listening, the American wrestling system the collegiate wrestling wrestles a folk style system, which I think has some elements of mat wrestling. You get some more time on the mat. You're rewarded for standing back up, and it's. I actually think it's more of a holistic wrestling system, but the Olympics fight under freestyle rules, which is it's really just takedowns, right? It's just takedowns, then you got 20, 30 seconds to turn the guy.
Well, it's takedowns, but it's also throws.
Throws, yeah.
So, for example, I could pick up a guy and slam him to the ground, and if you do it in what we call folk style, which is college style, if you slam a guy, you get penalized. In freestyle, if you slam a guy, you get rewarded. So they had and when I did it, it was just beautiful. It was a beautiful sport. They've changed it now, which is really depressing to me, especially that we're doing mixed martial arts, because what we were doing back then was so much closer to what they do in mixed
to fighting.
Arts. Yeah.
Can you explain the rule change in freestyle wrestling? My understanding is like you actually get more points if the guy's feet go over his head or something like that, right? Like the better the throw, you get more points.
Yeah,
right?
so we call them like souffles when you're doing an arch back, and I don't, or hip toss, and things like that. You would get if his feet fly in an arching motion, and you take him to his back. I don't know if it was 3 or 5 points. I forget what the points were.
Got it.
But also in freestyle, you couldn't go to your back. So if you went to your back at any time, that would be points. Mm-hmm. And so you had to be careful about it, unless you were doing a throw. But the techniques were totally different, because in folk style, you could sort of from time to time wrestle on your back without giving up points.
Mm-hmm. Like a tilt or something like that.
Yes, yeah. It's hard to sort of explain verbally, but freestyle is a lot faster. And when I did it, they required you to have your head up. So you couldn't. If you see wrestlers, you'll see wrestling today, and they're really low to the ground. I call it rat wrestling, where they have their heads real low, because if you block with your head, then you can block a lot of leg attacks.
Almost like John Smith type of style.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. That's what I call rat wrestling. But John was
your favorite rat.
Wrestler. Yeah, he's my favorite rat. Absolutely. Yeah. But in 1980 and before that, you had to keep your head up, and you had to contact a guy, and so you had to walk into him and do arms. So it made for example, we would have matches that would be like 23-17, with arm throws.
Oh, just throwing each other.
Spins, trips, all the beautiful stuff of the martial arts. Yeah. And that's all gone now, because they went to the rule allowing the guys to lower their head. It's so depressing.
Got it. Yeah. So the rule change was that you used to have to have your head like above your hips or something like that. Or?
Yeah, you couldn't block with your head. If you see wrestlers, they get in a wrestling stance.
I've seen it. Yeah,
it's a good stance. Well, you couldn't block with your head. You had to keep your head up, and so your contact was through the arms, which is more like a fighting situation.
It is more.
Because who's going to put your head down, right?
Not in a fight. Not in a fight. No.
No. And so
it's almost more like theory at that point, right? Like, yeah. There's a lot of gamesmanship of the rules that I'm actually really sort of depressed about in the sport of jiu-jitsu. Because jiu-jitsu does allow you to frankly, almost encourages fighting on your back.
Right.
It's actually much harder to define a rule set, because you can't say, oh, there's points for going to your back. Like, well, I wanted to be here, right?
Right.
So a lot of the way that the rule sets are defined are sort of like who initiated the move. Mm-hmm. So like if you're sort of like on top of me, I'm not going to get positions for reversing positions and winding up on top. If it was if you attempted an arm bar but wound up on bottom of me, so then the ref has to make these really subjective calls of who initiated the move, and I think that's like not really in the spirit of fighting, because you'll have the winner of the match be the guy who spent 90% of the match on bottom. But not be able to effectively put up a submission,
Yeah.
And then also there's just a lot of just like sitting right down to your butt in jiu-jitsu, which is, I think, just painful to watch, and also not in the spirit of fighting, So how did you change up your training regimen from folk style to freestyle? Did you feel like all that time you spent like mat wrestling, like under the prior rule set, did you feel like that helped you? Do do you feel like it was maybe kind of wasted?
Well, that
I hesitate to say wasted, but
I think it really is to do folk style and then have to switch to freestyle to wrestle internationally really puts American athletes at a tremendous disadvantage because it is a different style. And when I did it, when you had to keep your head up, then there were a whole sort of because in folk style you could put your head down, so there was all sort of upper body hand fighting that you didn't know. I mean, and so what I had to do to train was there's a guy named Dan Chandler who I think was the best thing I ever did. He was a Greco-Roman wrestler, but he coached at Minnesota. And one of the things my coach Jay Robinson told me, always make sure you learn from everybody and go seek out the best to learn from. And so I went to Dan Chandler and I spent time with him for a week training on just upper body hand fighting. Wow. And that's why I decimated people in the Olympic Games, the Olympic trials in 1980. Because before they would get me for stalling because they would underhook me and push into me basically to prevent me from shooting on them, and then I get called for stalling. Well, they couldn't underhook me anymore because I had they couldn't control I had the hand fighting was down. So that was just put me to another level.
Mm-hmm. Were you
Then I did some judo, and I had
did you really?
Park at Iowa State. Did judo, so I got my arm spins and arm throws from him, and I could kill with some arm throws. I was a mean arm throw guy. I loved it.
Did you get into the foot sweeps very much, or
a little bit? Yeah,
a little bit. Yeah, those are slick. I when I think about foot trips, I'm just like, man, that's like some of the highest level of grappling is like just the timing involved in just catching someone's foot right before it hits the mat. Like it's really slick too. Like if you're in a bar, you can really, if you have to defend yourself, like those little foot sweeps, or you can use them in a phone booth,
So we had a guy on the Iowa State wrestling team who I was coaching. I can't forget his name right now, but he ended up being on the Olympic team. And so I would do a little judo with him or do a little wrestling with him, and I can remember one day I foot swept him. Oh. And so I was,
you foot swept the judo guy.
Yeah. But then I would go with some judo guys, and they would grab my wrist and lock me out in like 5 seconds. And it was like I was completely helpless.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting. You were like I feel like there wasn't a lot of cross training back in the day.
Yeah.
Even now, we're just starting to barely scratch the surface of cross training.
Well, Dave Schultz, who was one of the greatest coaches we had in America, I don't know if you know his story.
Mm-hmm.
He was into jiu-jitsu and all kind of fighting arts. And so, and that was sort of what he brought to the table too. And
so you, just to go back to the folk style freestyle things, it's something I'm just interested in. Yeah. Would you recommend that the American collegiate system just adopt the freestyle rules?
Sure.
Yeah. Do you think that hurt the fan base, or
no? Well, let's put it this way. Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, the rules are so screwy right now. So they are so how would I say it? Directed towards not allowing people not to score. When you start making people. You let people put their head down, you go and eliminate scoring. And, scoring is what is
makes
entertaining.
It fun. Yeah.
And so, and for me, with mixed martial arts being so, popular now, I was always under the impression that if they made the wrestlers keep their head up now, wrestling would have more interest because you would see the arm throws and the trips, and the stuff that everybody now can identify with because of the mixed martial arts, because of UFC and all those guys.
That's a fair point.
But I do think they should go to international style. But everybody wants to have control of their own destiny and what they want to do. So the whole point was we're not going to change our style for somebody in Europe, right? I mean, that's the argument.
That is a uniquely American point of view. So you're robbed of the opportunity to compete in the Olympics. You come back and win the World Championships that year. Did you feel kind of vindicated at that point? Like you kind of put let that wound heal, or is that sort of kind of still tearing away? Because you sought out another Olympics years and years later.
Yeah. Well, nothing could sort of heal that wound.
Yeah, that's fair.
And obviously, I probably wouldn't have competed in '92 had I been able to compete in '80 or probably even '84. Although '84 was I don't want to denigrate anybody's medal because it shouldn't be. But 84, they didn't have half the world participate, like in 80 didn't have half the world participate. So for me, I would want to be in the Olympics where
everyone
the whole world participated.
And so 84, 88, you were firmly retired.
88, yeah.
Can you just...
No idea.
Yeah.
So in 84, I started working at the law firm. I graduated from law school in 87, got a job with a corporation, started working there in 88. I think in 88, had no idea that I was actually going to be wrestling again.
Could you just describe that emotional arc that you traveled sort of reluctantly, sort of, I guess, retiring and then kind of getting that fire back and figuring out that you could do it?
Well, I mean, for me, it was, so in 84, I didn't think that I would ever be, I didn't think that it would be possible for me to get a head coaching job.
Okay.
And so...
You had applied to Michigan, is that correct? Or...
Oh, I haven't applied over time to many schools.
Got it.
But I don't know that I had applied for any schools in, so this would have been, 82, 83.
Okay.
But I just felt like that wasn't something that was could happen in this country. I mean, they had one guy, Bobby Douglas, but that was it. And so...
and this is going back, you didn't feel an African American was going to get a head coaching job.
Yeah, certainly not a head coaching job at a top program, no. And, people have told me, well, you got the boosters and fundraisers, and there's no way that you're going to be able to raise funds if and so, I mean, that was the environment I was living in. Whether that's true or not is a whole different story, right?
Sure.
But I didn't feel it was at the time. So I wanted, and I knew what poverty was about. So I decided, I'm going to go to law school. And so I went to law school basically, so to prevent from being poor. I mean, I had trained myself pretty hard all the way up to 84 and had injuries and nothing else to show for it, right?
No.
I was a world champion and basically was broke. So then I went to law school, and then in 88 I was, working in-house at a corporation, didn't anticipate wrestling. And then in 89 I started working as Mark Kerr had this kid who needed some direction, and so it was a good fit for me to have a young kid, and it was a good fit for him to have somebody who really was a wrestler, right? I mean, because he got to wrestle with one of the best guys in the world as a college kid. Mm-hmm. And that's when I started to get that hunger. I figured, well, I could compete again. Because at the time, I thought I would get hurt every week.
Kerr was smashing everybody at the time, too. And
no,
if you're,
he wasn't.
No. Well, in MMA,
Yeah, in MMA, I'm not sure.
Yeah, in MMA, he was a world champion in MMA.
Yeah.
But he wasn't the most gifted wrestler?
He was one of the most athletic individuals I've ever wrestled against.
Okay.
But he wasn't disciplined enough to be successful.
Interesting.
And so, and I think that's what I helped him with, to get him, to say, this is what you have to do to be successful. You have to train consistently. We've got to work out twice a day. You got to make sure that we drill, we practice our technique, and so on. And I'd make sure that he did it. And in making sure that he did it, I was doing it too.
Got it.
And so we helped each other, basically.
Got it. Yeah, no, see, he had, I think he'd actually won the Abu Dhabi championships.
Now, yeah,
but that's grappling, right?
Here's what I'm talking. So this time period would be 84 to.
Okay,
so
got it.
So he didn't do mixed martial arts until he left college.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I was working with Mark before college.
Okay.
Or during college.
But that made you feel like you could come back.
Well, I wasn't getting hurt.
Yeah.
And like I say, I'm one of those guys. I'll wrestle here, there. You got a mat, someone put it down. I'll wrestle. I remember I went to. It must have been about five years ago. I went to Iowa, and we were out at a meet, and the meet was over, and I was standing around on the mat, and this guy comes up to me. The kid comes up to me. He's at my weight class. He goes, Chris Campbell, I always wanted to wrestle you, to think about it. And I was like, there's a mat. Let's go. And he looked at me like, but that was sort of the mentality that I had, and a lot of guys I had, that we just wanted to go.
Yeah.
So if I could go, I was going to go. So again, I was shocked that I wasn't getting hurt. And then I tried to compete. The
second time around for the '92 Olympics, you have to change up your training protocol and sort of acknowledging that you'd aged a bit, or.
Well, the techniques had changed quite a bit, so I had to become familiar with the technique. I couldn't train as hard as I could have when I was 26. So I had to figure, how many days a week I could wrestle. If I really got beat down and I couldn't recover, maybe I could only wrestle twice a week.
Oh, wow.
Because my recovery, I just didn't have it.
Okay.
And so I had to. That was, I think, the hardest thing to figure out that balance with that.
How were you able to get?
So I didn't cut weight either because if you're cutting weight, you'd be exhausted. So I wrestled a weight class higher.
Okay. How did you make sure to get in all the training and mat time that you would need to prepare for the Olympics with only being able to really do it maybe 2, maybe 3 times a week? Do you just have to be really judicious about how you're going to spend your time, or?
Well, when I say if I'm wrestling hard, I would only wrestle hard maybe if once especially from really in a training hard period, and my body breaks down, I could only wrestle hard maybe twice a week.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean I couldn't drill and walk through the rest of the positions and walk through the move. And drilling is really important. People don't put enough emphasis on it. But, going through the step-by-step of each move, making sure your body's balanced, making sure your head's in the right place, making sure you're executing it in slow motion and doing it, and then maybe a little faster and then a little faster, but mostly slow motion, and make sure everything is right in your technique so that when you hit the technique, you don't have anything out of place, your arms or your elbows, your head. Everything is in the right place. That's critical. So in some respects, it could be helpful because I had to spend a lot more time doing that. And then I would,
Would you say you were a little wiser?
Wiser. I don't know if I'd ever accuse me of that.
Well, it just sounds like you were just very methodical about it.
Well, my wife at the time and some of my coaches had to come and say to me, "Okay, Chris, we can tell you're exhausted. Don't wrestle today." Because when I went to the Olympic trials, or the Olympic Games, start training for them, I wanted to wrestle, 4 days a week. I figured I got to wrestle at least 4 days a week. And, after the first week or two, I could barely move. So I had to really, and it was my wife and the coaches that say, "Well, Chris, maybe you shouldn't be wrestling today.
Yep.
We'll cut it down. Some days only wrestle twice a week."
When you came back the second time, much your old cohort was gone, maybe aged out of the sport?
Different guys, yeah.
Different guys, right?
Yeah.
And you were probably you were in Iowa. You were one of the handful of black guys on the team. Mm-hmm. Later on, you're probably the only guy, 37, 38.
Yeah. Right.
So it was something kind of special about you in the room.
They called me Grandpa. Yeah. Yeah, I was called Grandpa. It was, for me, it was my haven, just being able to go in the wrestling room. If I could do anything in the world, going in the wrestling room was the thing I would do, right?
Got it.
So I was just in heaven.
So take us through the 92 Olympics that were in Barcelona?
Yep, they were in Barcelona. So
how many matches did you have?
I had 5 matches, and I had the defending Olympic and world champion the very first match. And here's a funny story. So when I made the Olympic team, the rules were that when you got called for stalling, I'm not sure what they did for stalling, but they didn't put you down. So mat wrestling. So the whole time from 88 through 92, I had never done a bunch of freestyle mat wrestling, which involved a lot of turns.
Right,
and then you
right.
had to know the defenses for those turns.
Right.
Like the week before the Olympic Games, they changed the rule to allow this turning, which was really unheard of because you don't, you want to have the rules, the quad leading up to the tournament the same. It should. So they changed it, which was a severe disadvantage for me because I hadn't developed all the technique. So when I went out to wrestle Kardashev, who was the defending world champion and the defending Olympic gold medalist, when I got called for stalling, they put me down and he turned me like a top. So I lost that match to him 7-0, I think it was, something like that. That was my first match. And then after that, and so when you do that, you sort of go into a loser bracket.
Yeah.
So the best I could do was get the bronze medal. And then I think the second match I had was a guy from New Zealand who was basically a high school wrestler. I brutalized him. And then I had a guy from Japan who's named Oda who got 2 silver medals in the Olympics the 2 years before that.
Oh, wow.
And I beat him out. And then my next match, which was the most fulfilling, was a guy from Cuba. And the guy from Cuba I had wrestled in the Pan American Games. He beat me in the Pan American Games in Cuba, and I can remember basically I slipped on the mat on some wet water, and he got a takedown, and so he won. And they were celebrating. They had the band marching out in Cuba and so forth.
Yeah.
And then I in 1991 in the World Championships, I had beat Kardashev, who was the defending world champion.
Okay.
Medal. I beat him in the preliminary rounds, and then I had one match to go before I was going to go into the finals again. And all I ever wanted to do was be a world champion again. And I got this Cuban guy. And then he beat me by pushing me out of bounds, getting to one point. That knocked me out. So I got 5th there. So in the Olympic Games, we were there, and my match with him was before for being able to get into the medal match, the bronze, and I beat him in the overtime. And then that put me into the bronze medal match, and a guy from Mongolia. And then we went into overtime too.
Oh, wow.
I beat him in overtime match. So I was
my goodness.
37 beating these young kids in overtime, which I got a great feel from. Right?
Yeah, you'd expect the older guy to maybe putter out in overtime.
In my mind, there's no way they would have to kill me to give up anything. I'd have been on my last leg. That just was my frame of mind.
Yeah, you had this big corporation behind you. You had probably some name ID because of your story was so unique.
Yeah. I found that a little distracting.
Did you?
Yeah, and I had a little bit of concern with that. I wish I would have handled it better, because at the Olympic Games I said I don't want to talk to the media because I was afraid that would affect my focus. I should have talked to the media.
Yeah.
That I messed up on. But I got bad advice too. But no, it was a little bit distracting. And I was concerned it was getting in my head, and I didn't want it to get in my head like you're somebody. I wanted to be focused on the here and now. Got it.
Yeah, because I saw an interview with you on YouTube, and you were at the I think it was like the New York State Intersectional Wrestling Championships, and they brought you on you were 38 and you were getting ready for another tournament. It was after the Olympics. Yeah. But it seemed like such a cool story that you kind of maybe would have gotten some name ID and some attention, and I was wondering what that was like, balancing all those things together.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was a little time. I had my 15 minutes of fame, right? Yeah. There was a little time when anywhere I went into the country, people recognized me because they had me an article in Sports Illustrated, and I was in the New York Times and a lot of magazines. I don't think it was People too. So they did cover me because not only was I older, but I was had an Ivy League law degree, and so I was this kind of thing that people thought was positive.
Yeah. You actually kept wrestling after the Olympics.
I wrestled.
After the 92 Olympics.
I wrestled in I wrestled, it was in the national championships, and actually I think I broke my neck during that period of time, and I didn't know it. And so at the national tournament I got second, and I couldn't push off with my right arm, and basically I got called for stalling for stepping out of bounds because I couldn't push off. So then after that, I went to the doctors, and they took x-rays and said, you broke your neck. It's fortunate you had good strong muscles because it held your neck together. So I'm fused in 4 places.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And that was it.
That was it.
Oh.
Yeah.
So then you settled comfortably into the desk job.
I don't know if comfortably.
Reluctantly maybe.
No. I would love to be as good an attorney as I was a wrestler. I just never
I'm sure
had the passion to do that. Because if I was as good an attorney as I was a wrestler, I'd be worth millions, and I'm not. I'm just not. Okay. And so you have to deal with your mediocrity, but I got to survive. I got bills to pay.
Yeah. So there's that's actually interesting. There's on my way to work at the state capitol, there's a little memorial for the Purple Heart veterans, and it says, to those who have seen combat, life has a flavor the protected will never know, and kind of the same sentiment for high level athletes. After they're done, everything's just kind of, or actually I had a good friend of mine who's no longer with us, come back from a lot of intense combat in Iraq and Afghanistan, and he actually killed himself, I think because of it. But he's one thing that he said to me was nothing's quite as exciting, So did you struggle with that when you finally retired?
Still am. I don't think. competing in a lifestyle that competing gives you, traveling around the world and meeting new people and beating them up, right? It doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah, yeah.
And so you got to go to the same job, sit at a desk, and have somebody yelling at you or screaming at you. It's just like, oh, I could just snap your neck.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, it can be very depressing, and I've gone through, I've gone through like 5-10 year periods of time where the fact that I just was not happy with life.
Got it. So you're looking back instead of trying to forward or something like that, or
just because I'm not. I mean, when I was wrestling, competing, I don't know. Life was interesting and it was exciting.
Right.
After it, no, not so much. And so when you just get up, do the same thing every day, look at the same contract every day, the same language. I mean, at a certain point, you're like, I mean, not that I'd ever want to do it, but you feel like blowing your brains out, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's just like, oh, this is just, life is too short for this.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair.
But you gotta work, you gotta survive.
You gotta survive, right? You got a family, you got kids.
Yeah, so you go from a situation where you're pursuing your passion to a situation where you're just struggling to survive, which is different. It really is a little bit emotionally deflating. Yeah,
I'll bet. Yeah. So I think we're past the point now where an African American couldn't take a head coaching job at a top tier school. Mm-hmm. Is that something that interests you at all still, or like maybe go back or work your? I mean, you've got the skill set, you've got the knowledge, you've got the passion. Have you ever thought about trying to get a coaching position?
No.
Or do you feel like that's you tried and it passed? And
I'm past it because I got so many injuries. To me, in order to be a good coach, you've got to be able to get down and show a person what they're doing wrong. And
like Gable was in the wrestling with you guys.
Oh, Gable was in wrestling. Now I didn't necessarily have to be wrestling with the guys every day, but I feel I do need to be able to execute the technique properly to show them how to do it. And I should be running with them and weightlifting so that they understand the seriousness of training, conditioning. And I couldn't do any of that. Got
it. You ever just go around to the high schools and just kind of offer to help out?
Sure. I don't offer to help out because you can be intimidating. So if I'm this Olympic wrestler, world champion, it could be intimidating to coaches. So I don't offer my help. If somebody asks, then I'll come and help them. But
got it. Getting a little bit over an hour here. I think I've asked you pretty much everything that I've had that I've wanted to pick your brain about. Thanks again for taking the time. Just kind of final thoughts. What advice would you have to sort of young wrestlers coming up now?
Well, it's interesting because it's sort of an experience I had with my daughter. Well, with the young wrestlers coming up, make sure you're always learning different stuff. So I would say a young wrestler coming up should do judo, jiu-jitsu, and everything else. I mean, you want to learn all the fighting styles. That would be what I would say. But, I mean, I would also say if it's not your passion, don't do it. Because I understand a little bit more now about my passion because I had a passion. I didn't realize it when I was in it. But I do now. I had a passion, and that passion was what made me successful. So I would always say, make sure you pursue your passion. That's what I would say.
Very cool. I'm gonna actually isolate that and make it its own clip. Thank you for that.
Yeah.